The galactic arena was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Millions of aliens from 1,000 different worlds watched the giant screens. They weren't used to seeing real violence. For them, war was like a professional sports match. You follow the rules, someone wins, someone loses, and everyone shakes hands afterward. They called it the way of honor. But on the dusty floor of the arena, things looked different. General Vark, a massive creature with scales like armor, stood over a man named Arthur. Arthur was the human ambassador. He wasn't a soldier. He was a guy who liked gardening and jazz music. Now he was bleeding, his suit was torn, and Vark was holding a long, glowing ritual blade. Vark looked directly into the floating camera drones. He wanted the whole universe to see this. "Look at this creature," Vark hissed. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Humanity is a mistake. They have no place in a galaxy of warriors. They cry when they are hurt. They beg for mercy when they lose. They have no honor, they are just soft." The aliens watching from their luxury ships nodded. To them, if you couldn't win a duel, you didn't deserve a planet. Arthur coughed. A bit of blood landed on his white shirt. He looked at the stain, then looked up at the giant alien. Most people would be screaming or praying. Instead, Arthur started to chuckle. It started as a tiny sound in his throat. Then it turned into a dry, raspy laugh. The alien translators started buzzing. They didn't have a word for this kind of laughter. It wasn't the sound of someone who just heard a joke. It was the sound of someone who had just stopped caring about the consequences. "What is so funny, little meat bag?" Vark growled, stepping on Arthur's hand. Arthur didn't flinch. He looked Vark right in the eye. "You keep using that word, honor. You think this is a game? You think there are referees and trophies?" Arthur leaned back, ignoring the pain. "We played by your rules because our government didn't want the paperwork. They didn't want the headache of cleaning up a mess. We were being polite, Vark. We were being civilized because the alternative is exhausting." The general laughed, a deep, mocking sound. "And what is the alternative? More crying?" "No," Arthur said, his voice becoming deathly calm. "The alternative is spite. We don't care about winning a trophy anymore. We just want to make sure you never, ever enjoy a single second of your life again. We aren't fighting for a planet now. We're fighting because you annoyed us. And God help you, because a bored, angry human is the most dangerous thing in the stars." Arthur looked at the camera one last time. "Hey guys? Yeah, he's the one. Do your thing." Suddenly, the live feed didn't just go black, it glitched. Every screen in the Krell Empire started flickering. They didn't see a military logo. They saw a picture of a human, drumpy cat, meme with the words IOFMP. Across the galaxy, the human fleet didn't do what the Krell expected. They didn't charge in with big lasers and heroic music. They did something much weirder. Every human ship suddenly went dark. They turned off their long-range scanners. They stopped responding to hails. It was like humanity had simply walked out of the room. But they weren't leaving. They were spreading out. On the Krell homeworld, the High Admiral was waiting for a glorious space battle. He wanted to win with honor. Instead, his lights went out. Then his backup generator exploded. Then, his personal computer started playing a 10-hour loop of a human song called "The Song That Never Ends." He couldn't turn it off. He smashed the computer, but the sound kept coming from the walls. In the arena, Vark looked around, confused. "Where is your army? Where is your fleet?" Arthur stood up slowly, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked tired, but he had a mean little smirk on his face. "They aren't coming to fight you, Vark," Arthur said. "That would be too easy. They're out there making sure every Krell ship has a check engine light that never goes away. They're making sure your food tastes like wet cardboard. They're making sure your empire falls apart because nobody can get a good night's sleep." Arthur leaned in close. "You wanted to see what humans are really like. Welcome to the show. We call this petty revenge, and we are the world champions." The galaxy was about to learn that honor is a luxury, but spite is a full-time job, and the humans were ready to work overtime. The Krell High Command sat in their golden war room, waiting for a beep. In their culture, war was like a high-stakes chess game. You send a digital letter saying, "We shall meet at the Red Nebula at noon." You bring your biggest ships, you show off your shiny lasers, and if the other guy has more guns, he wins. The loser signs a paper, pays some money, and everyone goes back to their families. It was clean. It was honorable. They waited for the human fleet to send a location. They waited for a formal challenge. They waited for hours. Then, the lights went out. Not just the lights in the room, but the power for the entire Krell Prime sector. The Krell's main fuel station, a massive structure that powered half the planet, didn't just explode, it simply stopped existing. There was no epic space battle, no heroic music, no giant lasers. A single, beat-up human cargo ship normally used for hauling space trash had drifted toward the station for 2 days. It had its engines off. It looked like a piece of floating junk. Inside, a human pilot named Sully had been sitting in a freezing cockpit, eating cold noodles and breathing through a tiny oxygen mask just to stay hidden from the Krell scanners. He didn't wait for a glorious moment. He waited until he saw the Krell station commander through a long-range lens sitting down to eat a bowl of expensive soup. Then, Sully just let the ship's momentum carry the trash, hauler right into the station's cooling intake. Clunk. The station's reactor choked on a ton of old human refrigerators and scrap metal. It didn't blow up the planet. It just shut down the heat and power for 3 billion Krell citizens. In the dark war room, the Krell generals scrambled to turn on their emergency tablets. They were furious. They sent an urgent message to the human high command. "What is the meaning of this?" The Krell Grand Marshal screamed into the comms. "There is no glory in hitting a fuel station with a garbage truck. There is no honor in hiding in the dark for 2 days. Where is your fleet? Where is the duel? We had our best pilots ready for a fair fight." The response from Earth came back 5 minutes later. It wasn't a long speech. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was just a text message that read, "We don't want glory. We just want you to be cold." The Krell didn't understand. Why would someone waste a ship just to make them uncomfortable? It made no sense in a honorable war. But the humans weren't done. Down on the planet, the Krell soldiers tried to use their high-tech heating units. They clicked the buttons, but instead of warm air, the machine started playing a loud, distorted recording of a human kazoo. Toot toot tootle toot. The Krell engineers opened the control panels and found that the software hadn't been hacked by a virus. It had been replaced by a simple EF then loop. If a Krell tries to get warm, then play the loudest, most annoying sound possible. "This is madness," whispered a Krell captain, shivering in his armor. "They aren't even trying to take our land, they're just being mean." That was the secret the galaxy didn't know about humans. If you fight a human for a house, he might give up to save his life. But if you insult a human and hurt his friend, he will burn his own house down just so the smoke gets in your eyes. The Krell expected a lion. Instead, they got a swarm of angry wasps that didn't care if they died, as long as they got to sting you in the ear. By midnight, the Krell Empire was in chaos, not because they were dying, but because nothing worked. Their automatic doors wouldn't open. Their fancy coffee machines only poured out lukewarm salt water. Their internet, the pride of the galaxy, was redirected to a single human website showing 24-hour footage of paint drying. The Grand Marshal slammed his fist on the table. "Send the fleet to Earth. Find their ships. We will force them into a fair fight. We will show them what real warriors do." But as the Krell ships took off, they noticed something terrifying. The humans weren't hiding. They were everywhere. Every tiny human mining ship, every small shuttle, and every old satellite was just sitting there. They weren't shooting. They were just blocking the paths. They were tailgating the Krell warships, flashing their high beam lights into the Krell cockpits, making it impossible for the pilots to see. It was petty. It was small. It was annoying. And it was working. The Krell weren't losing a war. They were losing their minds. General Vark, still back at the arena, watched the reports coming in. He looked at Arthur, who was still sitting on the ground, calmly tying his shoelaces. "Your people are cowards," Vark spat. "They won't face us in the light." Arthur looked up and smiled. It was a scary, tired smile. "Vark, you wanted a war with the Wake humans. But you forgot one thing. We've been dealing with annoying neighbors and bad traffic for thousands of years. We are the masters of the long game. You're playing for honor. We're playing for the sheer joy of watching you lose your temper." The Krell fleet reached the edge of the solar system, ready for the battle of the century. But they didn't find a wall of warships. They found a giant floating sign made of neon lights that could be seen from miles away. It said, "Why you left you or ovenon at hamum, via orgosis alpha." The Krell commanders paused. They knew it was a lie. They knew it was a trick. But for a split second, they all felt a tiny bit of worry. And in that second, they realized they weren't fighting soldiers. They were fighting the human spirit of spite. And spite never sleeps. The Krell invincible fleet reached Earth's orbit, and the scene was empty. There were no massive defense platforms, no heroic lines of battleships. It was just a quiet, blue marble. The Krell commanders were confused. According to the way of honor, the humans were supposed to stand their ground, lose a spectacular battle, and then hand over the keys to the planet. They have fled like cowards. General Vark shouted from his command ship, "Land the troops. We will take their cities and claim their resources. If they won't fight in the stars, we will rule their streets. Thousands of Krell drop. Ships descended into major cities like New York, London, and Tokyo. The soldiers marched out, weapons ready, looking for an enemy, but they found nothing. The humans were gone. The shops were empty. The power was off. It was a ghost world. At first, the Krell thought they had won the easiest war in history. But then, the sun went down. As soon as the first moon rose, the silence was shattered. From every sewer grate, every ventilation shaft, and every hollowed-out lamppost, a sound began. It wasn't a war horn. It was a high-pitched, digital melody that repeated every 3 seconds. Baby Shark, do-do-do-do. It was playing from millions of tiny, solar-powered speakers hidden deep inside the concrete. The Krell tried to blast the speakers, but for every one they destroyed, 2 more seemed to start up. The frequency was perfectly tuned to vibrate the Krell's sensitive inner ear membranes. "Make it stop!" a Krell sergeant roared, clutching his head. He kicked a nearby trash can in frustration. Paffed. A hidden pressurized canister exploded, spraying a thick, neon green liquid all over his armor. He tried to wipe it off, but the substance was like a mix of industrial glue and permanent ink. Within minutes, his skin began to etch. It didn't hurt, it just felt like 1,000 tiny ants were crawling on him. "It's a trap." "A chemical weapon," the sergeant screamed into his radio. "Negative," the Krell science officer replied, his voice trembling. "We analyzed the liquid. It's just green food coloring mixed with extra strength etching powder and super glue. It's not lethal. It's just incredibly annoying." By the second day, the invincible fleet looked like a circus. Thousands of elite Krell warriors were wandering the streets of Earth, glowing neon green, scratching themselves uncontrollably, and listening to children's songs on a 24-hour loop. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't aim their weapons. They couldn't even talk to each other without shouting over the music. General Vark landed his personal craft in the middle of Times Square. He was furious. He looked at his army, the pride of the galaxy, and saw grown warriors crying because they couldn't get the Baby Shark song out of their heads. He grabbed a megaphone and yelled at the empty buildings. "This is not war. This is a joke. You humans have no dignity. Face us like warriors. Fight us with honor." Suddenly, every giant billboard in Times Square flickered to life. They didn't show the human president. They showed a guy sitting in a lawn chair, wearing a bathrobe and drinking a beer. It was Arthur, the ambassador from the arena. He looked like he had just woken up from a very comfortable nap. "Hey, Vark," Arthur said, leaning back. "How's the music? Catchy, right? My niece loves that one." "You have abandoned your homes," Vark screamed, his face turning a dark shade of purple. "You have left your cities to rot. What kind of species destroys its own civilization just to bother an enemy?" Arthur took a slow sip of his drink and smiled. "That's the thing you don't get about spite, Vark. We didn't destroy our civilization. We just moved to the basement for a few weeks. We packed the good stuff, moved to the underground bunkers, and left the trash for you. We'll burn our own house down just so you have to breathe the smoke. We don't care about the house. We can build another one. But watching you etch, that's priceless." Vark pulled out his ritual blade and hacked at the nearest billboard. "We will find you. We will hunt you through the tunnels. Good luck with that." Arthur's voice echoed through the speakers, perfectly synced with the Baby Shark beat. "The tunnels are filled with Lego bricks. Millions of them, scattered all over the floor. And I know your species doesn't wear boots in the summer. Have fun with that." Vark looked down at his bare 3-toed feet. He looked at the dark entrance to the subway. He looked at his green, itching, sleep-deprived soldiers. For the first time in his life, the great general of the Krell Empire felt a cold shiver of true terror. It wasn't the fear of dying. It was the fear of being the punchline of a joke that lasted forever. "Withdraw." "What was that, General?" his second-in-command asked, scratching a green spot on his neck. "I fear Al," Vark roared. "Get us off this planet. Get us away from these people. They aren't soldiers. They're monsters." As the Krell ships scrambled to leave Earth's atmosphere, the billboards changed one last time. They showed a giant map of the Krell's own home planet. Under the map, there was a countdown timer and a single sentence. The Krell Empire was falling apart, but not from bombs or lasers. It was falling apart because of a complete lack of sleep and total frustration. The invincible fleet had retreated from Earth, but the nightmare followed them home. Every time a Krell ship tried to jump into hyperspace, their navigation computers would glitch and display a picture of a human middle finger. Their communication channels were jammed with recordings of 21st-century car insurance commercials. Finally, the Krell High Command couldn't take it anymore. They sent their most decorated diplomat, an elderly alien named Grak, to meet with the human fleet. Grak stepped onto the human flagship, the USS Petty Cash. He expected to see a room full of soldiers in heavy armor. Instead, he found Admiral Miller sitting in a swivel chair, wearing a wrinkled uniform and eating a ham sandwich over a pile of spreadsheets. Grak fell to his knees. "Please," he wailed. "We surrender. We admit it. Humanity is the supreme power. Take our gold. Take our outer rim colonies. We will give you anything. Just please, make the music stop. My species hasn't slept in 6 days. We are hallucinating that the walls are dancing." Admiral Miller didn't even look up from his sandwich. He took a slow bite, chewed thoughtfully, and wiped a mustard stain off his desk. "We don't want your gold, Grak," Miller said casually. "And your planets. Have you seen the tax records for those places? They're a mess. We don't want the headache of managing your citizens." Grak looked horrified. "Then what do you want?" "We offered you a warrior's peace. We offered you the spoils of war. That is the law of the galaxy." "See, that's your problem," Miller said, finally leaning forward. His eyes weren't filled with hatred. They were filled with a cold, annoying boredom. "You think this is a war about honor. You thought you could beat up our ambassador, humiliate us on TV, and then just pay a fine when you realized we were tougher than we looked. You thought we'd play by your rules." Miller tossed a small device onto the table. It was a remote. He pressed a button, and a screen showed the Krell homeworld. Every single digital billboard on their planet was currently showing a video of a human teenager doing an annoying dance. "You touched one of our guys," Miller continued. "Arthur is a nice guy. He has a cat. He has a wife. You broke his ribs for a ritual. Well, this is our ritual. It's called holding a grudge, and humans are the best in the universe at it. We will pay any price." Grak cried, his voice cracking. "We will give you the antidote to our ritual poison. We will build a statue of your ambassador." "No," Miller said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "Here is what's going to happen. We aren't going to invade you. That's too much work. Instead, we're just going to stay here. Our ships are going to sit in your trade lanes. Every time one of your cargo ships tries to deliver food, we're going to stop them and inspect their paperwork for 12 hours. Every time you try to use your planetary internet, we're going to slow the speed down so much that it takes 3 days to load a single email." Grak gasped. That is monstrous. You are strangling our culture." "It's not war, Grak. It's a hobby," Miller smiled. "We've got thousands of humans back on Earth who are currently competing to see who can write the most annoying computer virus for your plumbing systems. Tomorrow, every toilet in your palace is going to flush at the exact same time every 3 minutes. The day after that, your replicators will only make food that tastes like wet dirt and old socks." The Krell diplomat felt his heart sink. He realized then that they weren't dealing with a military. They were dealing with an entire species of trolls. "Why?" Grak whispered. "Why go to all this trouble? Why not just destroy us and be done with it?" Miller shrugged and took another bite of his sandwich. "Because if we kill you, the fun stops. But if we keep you alive and annoyed, we get to remind you every single day that you picked the wrong species to mess with. We're going to make sure the next 100 years of Krell history are just really inconvenient." As Grak was led back to his shuttle, he saw a group of human soldiers in the hallway. They weren't cleaning their guns. They were sitting around a laptop, laughing as they remotely changed the exit signs in the Krell palace to say, "This way to the bathroom." The Krell had come looking for a fight with gods. Instead, they had started a fight with the kings of petty revenge. And they were beginning to realize that death would have been much kinder. 10 years had passed since the day General Vark stood in the galactic arena and called humanity weak. In the history of the galaxy, 10 years is usually enough time for an empire to rebuild after a war. But the Krell Empire wasn't rebuilding. They were stuck in a loop of permanent, daily frustration. The Krell homeworld looked the same from space, but on the ground, it was a different story. The grand marble palaces were now covered in weird, unwashable graffiti that appeared overnight. The advanced transit systems, once the pride of the sector, now stopped at every single station for exactly 42 minutes while playing elevator music from 1970s Earth. General Vark sat in his office, which was now located in a basement because the elevators in the High Command building had been programmed to only go to floors that didn't exist. He was older, grayer, and his scales were dull. He reached out to turn on his desk lamp. Click. The light didn't come on. Instead, his computer screen glowed to life, showing a high-definition video of Arthur, the human ambassador. In the video, Arthur was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and holding a small umbrella drink. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the camera and let out a long, slow, relaxed chuckle. "I know you're there, Vark," the recorded voice of Arthur said, "just checking in. Hope the itch is gone. By the way, we noticed your empire tried to launch a new satellite yesterday. We didn't shoot it down. We just replaced its lens with a picture of a giant rubber duck." "Enjoy the scientific data." Vark put his head in his hands. He didn't scream anymore. He didn't have the energy. The galaxy was watching the Krell with a mixture of horror and fascination. Other alien races, like the warlike Zog or the cold, logical Xylos, had stayed far away from Earth. They had realized something terrifying. Humans didn't follow the balance of power. Most species fight because they want something: land, minerals, or slaves. When the cost of the war becomes higher than the value of the prize, they stop. But humans were the only species in the known universe that would spend 1 billion credits just to make an enemy lose 5 cents. They would stay up all night, ruin their own sleep, and use their brightest scientists just to figure out how to make an alien's shoes squeak with every step. The final lesson was taught during the Great Galactic Summit. Every major species was there. The human representative walked in, not with a fleet of guards, but carrying a small box of donuts. He sat down at the table next to the Krell representative, who was shivering because his smart suit had been hacked to stay at exactly 60 degrees Fahrenheit. "We would like to discuss the end of the spike campaign," the Zog leader said nervously. "The Krell have suffered enough. Their economy is a mess because your hackers keep replacing their currency with Dogecoin. Their people are tired. Their general is living in a basement. Is this not enough?" The human representative took a bite of a glazed donut. He chewed slowly, looking around the room. "We didn't start this to gain territory," the human said simply. "We didn't start this to be the kings of the galaxy. We started this because they thought our kindness was a weakness. They thought honor was a shield that would protect them from the consequences of being bullies." He leaned forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "In our history, we have a saying, 'Don't poke the bear.' We are a very loud, very messy, very strange species. Most of the time, we are busy fighting each other over things that don't matter. But if you unite us, if you give us a reason to be petty, we will ignore our own comfort just to make sure you never have a comfortable day again." He looked at the Krell representative. "The campaign ends when we feel like it. Maybe in another 10 years. Maybe 100. Or maybe, every time you think about being honorable again, you'll remember the sound of that song." "What was it?" "Baby Shark." The Krell representative burst into tears and ran out of the room. The lesson was etched into the mind of every diplomat in the room. You can fight a warrior because a warrior eventually gets tired. You can bargain with a king because a king has a price. But you never, ever provoke a human, because a human doesn't need to win. They don't need your gold or your land. They just need to know that somewhere, out there in the dark, you are annoyed, you are cold, and you are losing, and they are the ones holding the remote. The galaxy finally understood the true meaning of the word spite. It wasn't just a human emotion. It was a weapon of mass destruction that didn't leave a single crater. Just a universe that knew better than to ever touch a human's friend again.